morning. Thank you for coming today. This is going to be a talk about warbird appraisals. We're very lucky to have a gentleman here to my right, Jeremy Cox, and his right, Tim. He's running the slides. He's going to be the talker. And then I'm going to let him take the mic. But I wanted to tell you a few things that we've got going on that you need to be aware of. Try to help my wife with that sign-up sheet. We've got most of your names written down. So, and we've also got your emails written down. And we're trying to make it easier so you can just check your name if you want to come to the next event or the one after the one after. So we have them all listed. Try to help her out with that. And our next big talk is the first day of September. That's Richard Colombi. He's on your sheet there. Richard Colombi is a World War II veteran. He was in the Solomon Islands. I've heard him talk several times. He talked at the University of Kentucky. He's only 97 years of age. But he's going to talk about a torpedo bomber over in the Solomon Islands that he was stationed on for about a year over there. Next is going to be Jim Byron. He's coming down here from Indianapolis. He's a brigadier general. He was in the Kuwait invasion. I was in that once, the Persian Gulf War. We got some other people here. The gentleman that my wife's talking to right now is in the Persian Gulf War on the LPH. But anyway, he's going to talk about the occupation of Kuwait. I think you'd be very interested in what he's got to say. Can everybody hear me in the back? Can you hear me back there? Okay, next is Lisa Glower. She's going to talk about German war prisoner testimonies. Then a guy named Mr. Steele is going to talk about 9/11. He was at the Pentagon on 9/11. He's going to talk about his experiences there. Bruce Willis is a radio announcer from Jasper. He's going to talk about an American that was in the evacuation of Dunkirk. And he's also an expert on a person that was one of the Doolittle Raiders that was in the Japanese prison camp for about 3 years. He'll talk about both those things in November. We'll have him out on this. David Coker talked before about Chrysler. He's a friend of Joe Nichols. He didn't show up today, but he's going to talk about the changes in naval construction. December 1st, or the first Thursday of December, is Ted Zucker from Louisville. He's going to talk about our best ally in World War II. He's going to talk about all the mistakes that Hitler made in World War II. December 15th, Mr. Ward from Ward's Lumber Company. He was close to a teenager during World War II. He's going to talk about his experiences. He's very much an Evansville historian. Then in January, we got Jim Whalen. Jim Whalen was on an LST in the Battle of Lady Gulf. The Lady Gulf battle was over the Philippines. The biggest naval battle ever in the history of mankind. He was right in the middle of that battle, and he was on LST with a flotilla of, I think, 8 destroyers and about 10 LSTs. And 15 days after Lady Gulf, his ship was struck by a kamikaze plane, and he will talk about that experience. So he's only 96 right now. The next one will be Bill Brolin, and he's going to talk about a certain type of aircraft that he's going to fly and put right here for you to look at. That'll be in January. So we've got a heck of a lot of good speakers. We'd like to have all of you invite your friends and neighbors. Just make sure they sign up so they get a free meal. And then our big event is September 22nd this year, and there's going to be a plane out here. It's called B-24. Will run maybe one every 63 minutes, and B-24 was really important in World War II, a bomber. And then out on the big runway, next to the big runway, on the what do you call that, the trailway, the taxiway, it's 141 feet wide, and we're going to be able to let you walk and get on that plane. That's a B-29. It's called a Fifi. I think there's only 2 flying right now, a Fifi and also the Doc. And the Enola Gray is who dropped the atom bomb. And it's a plane just like that. It's a B-29. The Doc just flew up in Australia, flew every day for about 6 days. And this one, it'll be very impressive. You'll fly over Evansville 2 or 3 times. And you're allowed to get on it, but all the tickets are sold out. But like to have your fans, friends, and family come out here on September 22nd. It'll be a big day. We'll advertise a lot. So that's a big event for us. It's a big event for Evansville that people don't understand how important the atom bomb changed civilization, and this changed civilization from August 6th and August 8th or August 9th, 1945, because atomic energy was not utilized in warfare until then. So the kids, I asked a lot of kids, when did it drop? And they said, well, 1965. And I said, where did it drop? And they said, well, Russia or something like that. And you just ask the kids to see what they know about the atom bomb, and you will absolutely be floored. And that should not happen, because that threat of atomic energy is a terrible threat for all of us every day of our lives. So, sorry about all the talk, but we're going to have it right now. This gentleman's an expert coming from St. Louis. My team and I met him in Corpus Christi, but he's an evaluator of warbirds, and now we are a warbird owner here in this museum. And like an old coin or like a nice art, we now have some of that here. So we have to be more aware of how we have to protect it and how it's valued. Okay.
Thank you. Well, good afternoon to everyone. You're hear an accent, but I want to argue that you've got the accent. I don't have the accent, but I'm originally from the UK. This first slide, you think, my goodness, this is kind of boring. Well, I'm pretty passionate about coming up with values for rare and unusual airplanes, and hopefully I can impart to you some of my passion and give you some insight, but you'll also get a grasp of history and aviation as well. So we'll just get started. I actually bought and sold airplanes for 20 years and went full-time appraising in 2019. We drove down from Southwest Illinois, and I'm going to give you some insight. So first slide, please. And the question is, what is an off-book aircraft? Next slide. Pretty much any airplane that is not covered by a price guide. And I don't know how many of you are in the airplane business. If you're familiar with the aircraft Blue Book Price Digest, there's the airliner price guide, there's the aircraft value reference, and a handful of other specialized publications or databases you can subscribe to, but they only cover a very limited spectrum of airplanes. So this slide kind of gives you a little bit of an insight into what is an off-book airplane. Just did this in May. This is the first Air Force One, Columbine 2. It's in Bridgewater, Virginia. These guys rescued it from the desert a number of years ago, and I think it was 2017 they ferried it to Virginia, and as you can see, it's well on the way to being restored. It's about 3 years away from first to fourth, should I say, its next flight, because it's got plenty of hours on the airplane. But it was Dwight D. Eisenhower's airplane, and they needed an appraisal to donate the airplane to a 501c3 charitable organization that they had founded. So that was the need for the appraisal. But that's Columbine 2. Dwight D. Eisenhower actually used when he was the head of NATO before he ran for president. His ticket for his presidency was to fix the Korean War. So this airplane was given to him prior to his inauguration, but after he won the presidency. He actually flew in this airplane to Korea and had a number of talks and discussions, and it was a diplomatic trip. And then he got inaugurated and flew this airplane as his personal airplane for the President of the United States. But at that point, it hadn't been called Air Force One, because that came about when this airplane and a Eastern Airlines airplane, another Constellation, this is a standard Constellation, not a Super, they were over the skies of North Carolina together, and they had a very similar call sign. And what happened was there was confusion. So when they returned back to Washington, D.C. and had a meeting in the Pentagon, the heads of staff, chiefs of staff, they decided from that point on that any airplane that the President of the United States was riding in was going to be Air Force One, Navy One, Army One, or Marine One. So this has the distinction of being the world's first Air Force One. The Columbine 1 is in Tucson, Arizona. This, as I said, is in Bridgewater, and Columbine 3, so they upgraded Dwight's airplane while he was in office. So he had this for about 2.5 years, and then they gave him a super constellation, which is Columbine 3. His wife, I think, was from Colorado, and he named his airplanes Columbine, which is the state flower of Colorado, Columbine. So Columbine 1, 2, 3. Next slide, please. So here's another off-book airplane. I did this airplane up in Wisconsin in a museum similar to this. This is a non-flying airplane. The airplane, oh goodness me, I can't even think of the gentleman. He was the most winningest or most lethal fighter pilot during World War II. It's Richard Ira Bond. And he was a Navy pilot. He had 3 of these. All of them were shot out from under him. So you think, well, how the heck is this airplane here? Oh, something's happening. His hometown requested, by then it was the USAF, United States Air Force, as opposed to the U.S. Army Air Corps. They requested an airplane to remember him in his hometown. He actually passed away. He ran out of fuel. He survived the war, and he was shot. He wasn't shot down, but he survived the war and was flight testing an airplane for Lockheed out of Burbank, and he ran out of fuel and crashed in a suburb and passed away from that accident, unfortunately. They wanted to remember him, so the United States Air Force gave the town this airplane, which I believe, if I remember correctly, it was a 45 model. Didn't actually serve in combat, but used for various missions in Florida, Delaware, and Ohio. And there's another one painted identically in the Experimental Aircraft Association's museum as well. But this is the one in the interpretive center. Anyway, the reason I did the appraisal, just so you know, they hadn't had the airplane valued for almost 20 years, and they were wondering if they needed some, an increase to their insurance premium. And the last appraisal they had was like $950,000. This is static display airplane. This is the original airplane, and it has been restored to not flying condition. I appraised it, and it's worth close to $6 million, which they were amazed. And if the airplane was an airworthy airplane, then it probably would be a $15 million airplane. And since it was for insurance, I actually found a new friend over in the UK, which I visited last year. He actually builds full-size fiberglass replicas, and I found him on the internet, became friends, and he told me that he could build a replica of this P-38 Lightning for $850,000. So it appraised out to close to $6, so they could put $5 million in their pockets. And but obviously they haven't chosen to do that, and I'm not suggesting they should. But it would be nice if they did do that, because then it would get into the hands of somebody that would restore it to flight-worthy condition. Because it's lovely to see an airplane statically, but it's even better to hear it and see it fly through the sky. Next slide, please. So I'm going to bust through these because I'm long-winded, and I've got a time limit here. I want to try and give you the last slide right after noon, 12 o'clock. But I'm going to just buzz through. I break down aviation history or airplanes that fit into historical categories. So this gives you an insight. Break it into categories. Next down. So pre-20th century, you wouldn't come to think of it, but there's a 1783 gas balloon right there. Can everyone see it okay? Am I in the way? Okay. Next, we're just going to buzz through these. Obviously, a pioneer period, 1900 to 1913, that's pre-World War I. I took that picture in Paris at the Le Bourget, at the Musée d'Air. And that's the original burial. Obviously World War One. That's a D7 Fokker, same museum. And then we move into the Roaring 20s, 1920 through 1929, the first record breakers. Obviously, when the birth of aviation, not quite, we're talking Roaring 20s now, but there was a lot of competition back in those days with newspapers, because that was the media of the day, and they were in competition with each other, putting up prizes to make aviators and airplane builders break records and make newsworthy stories for them, events. So I call it first record breakers, and obviously that's the Gypsy Moth. Then we move into second record breakers, and the reason why I say second record breakers, I mean like Amelia Earhart and other notable aviators that broke a lot of records. It's kind of coming out of the cusp. I would say the end of the first record breakers was Charles Lindbergh crossing the transatlantic. Here we are, this is 1933, 1939, and that's a Beechcraft Model 18. Then we break it down even further. We get into early rotary wing. The first, and when I say rotary wing, I'm talking about autogyros just as much as helicopters. And the first autogyros in 1923. I've got the 8th Air Force symbol there because I've got to say my favorite period in the story is the Warbird era. So I had to denote that. But we move through modern rotary ring, pistons, golden age, early jets, classic turboprops, and the jet age. So we were talking about the autogyro. That's a Pitcairn Perry 1929 autogyro. So it's a further development from 1923. And of course, here we go. You have an even rarer airplane in our midst in this hangar facility. The P-47 is a lot more rare than the P-51, but I had to come up with an airplane for its life. I've given this presentation over the years, so I apologize to people who said it's not on there. But wait, it will be. You will see it in a further slide. Anyway, 1944 P-51D. And here, I think we missed one, though. No, we didn't. Actually, sorry. Modern rotary wing, that's an Augusta 109, that's in Switzerland. I appraised that 2 years ago. And here's an airplane that very familiar with Chuck here because he's invited me to come see his airplane after this. That's a 1947 Stagwing. What's interesting, doing the research on your airplane, Chuck, yours is 1939. And that's a very early airplane. And that is Pistons Golden Age. Early jets, mostly Warbirds, but 1942, 1957, that's a de Havilland Mark 6 Vampire. And this airplane is ugly as sin. However, it is, just so you know, and it's here in the United States, which is quite unusual, I think, but this is the world's oldest flying turboprop. And it's a Fairey Gannet. It was designed to operate off aircraft carriers, the Royal Naval Air Service, RNAS, in the UK. And this is 1954 airplane. But that is the oldest flying turboprop on the planet, which I think is fascinating. Also, as a vignette, The turboprop engine was actually built by or designed by a Hungarian out of Budapest, and it was like I don't know, it was 1920s, which just blew me away when I discovered that. The problem is, no matter, they always say the victors of conflicts are all the ones that get to write the history, and I know I grew up in England, which I previously mentioned. I would think most of you have grown up in the United States, maybe not. I'm a proud American, by the way, and if you serve, thank you for your service, genuinely. I'm a massive patriot. True, it absolutely 1,000%. Gotta say this, wherever you grow up, you learn the history of that country. And I learned so many things that the British were the first to everything. And the truth is, it's not true. And there's some instances where, you know, Americans have been the first. Some cases not true, but that's the way it works. But I was blown away when I learned this Hungarian invented the turboprop engine. So my logo on my shirt, on my hat, on my website is the world's rarest business jet. This airplane was built in St. Louis at McDonnell Aircraft. McDonnell Aircraft, and it was called the McDonnell 119. They later redesignated it the 120, and there was a program. It was called the UTX program. It was the Universal Transport Experimental program that the Air Force brought out in, I think, 1956, and they were looking to replace their prop-driven airplanes, mainly for officer, general transportation, but also the ability to carry freight, etc., etc., etc. So three contenders came up: McDonnell Aircraft in St. Louis, Lockheed out of Burbank, but they actually built them down in Georgia. They came up with the Jetstar, and there was Sabre, North American Aviation, out of El Segundo, that came up with the Sabre. And the Jetstar won. The Sabre won the Navy contract, and this airplane was left out in Copa. It's a 4-engine airplane, like a mini DC-8. Very cool airplane. Had Westinghouse turbine engines. Only one built. So they decided, well, let's try and sell this thing as a business airplane. So they redesignated it the 120 and went out in the world trying to sell it. There were no takers. So they ended up flying this airplane as a corporate airplane at McDonnell, then McDonnell Douglas, right up until 1985. So the airplane it's in El Paso, and it was donated 3 years ago. I did the appraisal, and so to me, this is the world's rarest business jet, and so that's what I use as my logo. Breaking it down again, modern jets, modern turboprops, pistons, 3 LCD EFIS, electronic flight instrumentation systems, modern pistons, ultralight amateur built light sport any decks. I went down to Savannah 2 years ago for a bank out of Austria, and they were taking a brand new delivery of this airplane, and I had to sign their acceptance papers to say it existed. It was per spec, etc., etc. Kind of fun, kind of cool thing. This was in Montreal. It's the power company. These are modern turboprops. These are the DHC 311s. They also had 2 Q400s, which I praised. Pre-EFIS, that's a Beechcraft Duke. No EFIS, electronic flight instrumentation systems in that airplane. And then you have, that's what I'm talking about. That's actually in a Cirrus, but most airplanes delivered today all have DV streams. Last categories, electric aircraft. It's now a thing, and will become an even bigger thing as we progress. replica and spacecraft. I actually did a spacecraft last year. I had to go down to Cape Canaveral for an airplane that made history. It was donated to the Smithsonian, and it was kind of fun. I'd love to tell you about it, but I'm under a gag order from 2 non-disclosures. It's a very private company, and it's not Elon Musk. When I bought and sold airplanes, I actually did 6 airplanes for Elon Musk, so I know Elon, but this is a different space company. I'm keeping quiet. Electric, this is the world's fastest electric airplane. I actually saw that. I was in Farnborough last month for the air show when this airplane was there. It's a Rolls-Royce airplane, and it's entirely electric. And I can't remember how. It's 400 kilowatts. They do it in kilowatts instead of horsepower. And I can't remember. This thing's close to 400 miles an hour, maybe more than 400 miles an hour. It's fast. It's the world's fastest electric. And replicas. So this is a 5/8 scale of the Spitfire. I took this 3 or 4 years ago at Oshkosh. It was taxiing across, and it's designed from Canada. But I mean, it's just like a Spitfire. It's just 5/8 scale, but it's a replica. And spacecraft. I'd like to show you the airplane I did appraise, but I can't. But that is a 1944, and basically space operations, spacecraft started in 1944 by the dark cloud that was the Nazis, but they started it all, 1944. So, statistic-wise, as you can read, there's less than 550,000 airplanes, and when I say airplanes, that's anything that flew that was man-made, that has been built, existed, may have been parted out, may have crashed, may have been destroyed, whatever. But every single airplane, with less than 550,000 airplanes, or aircraft, helicopters, what have you, that have ever been built in the world. Pretty interesting numbers, I think. It breaks down 440,000 general aviation airplanes. Basically, general aviation is anything that is not airlines and military. 30,000 commercial airlines aircraft, 54,000 military aircraft. When I say 54,000 military aircraft, that's worldwide. That's every Air Force, Navy, what have you, on the planet. And I kind of focus on business airplanes, unfortunately, because it pays the meat and potatoes of Gemini, but my passion is Warbirds, but 39,000 of turbine business aircraft and 32,000 helicopters. But what's really interesting, 60% of the world's fleet is here in the United States. And then the rest is everywhere else. Popularity, I find this really interesting. The Cessna 172, if you're familiar with that, it's a 4-seat high-wing monoplane, simulated, built out of Wichita by Cessna, now Textron. There's over 44,000 of those flying. That is the most prolific airplane on the planet. Next is the Boeing 737, even though they've had quality control issues up in Renton, Washington. But there's almost 11,000 of those, and that's from every, the straight 737 through the MAX and the BBJ series. This one blows me away. I was actually over in England, as I said, I went to Farnborough, but I also went around and visited several museums, and there's the World Helicopter Museum in Weston-super-Mare, Somerset, and my brother and I went there and toured around, and this slide is 3 years old, but those 2 pictures are actually a month old, because I've used a picture off the internet, and I actually took these myself. The Mill Mi-8 hit is the most prolific helicopter on the planet. There's almost 18,000 of them, and they're built in, sorry, I'll mention the name, Russia. But it's an amazing helicopter. King Air Series, there's over 4,000. Beechcraft citation made by Cessna is almost 7,000. The most popular turboprop is the Cessna Caravan, high wing, single engine, T6 powered. They do have some mods with different engines, but predominantly they're all built in actually Independence, Missouri, with the T6, and then the G550, the Gulfstream G550, similar to that bronze-colored one you saw earlier. That's the latest and greatest. That was G500. This is the 550, and the 550 was started producing 2 years ago. Back to the mill head. I haven't appraised one yet, but I will one day. But they're not legal to fly in this country on the U.S. register, and they won't get a U.S. certificate of airworthiness. But the Canadians are now giving them certificate of airworthiness, so it's a matter of time. I mean, there's almost 18,000 of these things in the world, so eventually you're going to see them flying in the United States. So, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this. The most prolific warbirds, obviously that's an L4 Cub observation airplane built by Piper out of Pennsylvania originally, and then out of Florida. They've been through probably more bankruptcies than I've actually had dinners, and I've had enough dinners, you can tell. But $20,000 to $100,000 for one of those. Over 20,000 of them built. Currently, there's probably, 13,000 around the world. Different models. Obviously, there's the J2, J3, J4, J5, the L4. The C-47, DC-3 initially, then C-47, built at 5 different plants around the country, when we were 6. $90,000 to $1 million. I just did one that was down in Antarctica. I didn't go. They asked me, do you need to see the airplane? I said, where is it? And they said, Antarctica. And I said, hell no. So I did a desktop. And what they do is there's some gentlemen up at Oshkosh on the opposite side from where the air show is, Basler. And they actually take the old DC-3s, C-47s, they buy them up. There's a whole stash of them sitting out in their field, out behind their facility. And when they get an order, they take one of these, which, $90,000 to $1 million. Their airplanes, by the time they're done, are 18, 19. They put turboprop engines on, they extend the fuselage, they do a bunch of stuff. They do about $18 million worth of stuff. but they're cool because exploration, research organizations, non-governmental organizations, etc., love these airplanes because even though they were built in the late 30s through World War II and beyond as well, they're pretty rugged airplanes. And even though they don't say that they're zero-time airplanes, they are relaunched as far as the FAA is concerned. Anyway, over 16,000 DC-3/C-47 built. Then, of course, we've got the T6, SNJ, Harvard, over 15,000 built, anywhere between 120,000 to 800,000. Then the Boeing Stearman, we have one there, 80,000 to $500,000, over 9,000 of those built. Then we've got your airplane at the bottom here. At the top, we have the Bell T-39 Air Cobra. There's only 3 of them flying in the world. That's 5 million plus. And then, of course, your airplane. Anywhere between 2 million and 8 million, by my estimation. There's actually 24 of them that are flying in the world. But over 15,600 built, and most of them built right here, as you well know. But a fabulous airplane. One of the rarer airplanes, and there are rarer airplanes than these, but iconically, people are interested in, the FW-190 is an interesting airplane because there's only 5 of them flying, and again, 5 million plus for one of those. And then here we are, the P-38 Lightning, 15 million plus, so it's an airworthy airplane, and there's only 9 of them flying. Did a Mosquito. There's a lot of the Mosquitoes have been restored in North Island, New Zealand, and they've got one that is earmarked for the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight out of Lincolnshire in the United Kingdom. They're the folks that the British government, basically, if you're in the Air Force and if you're lucky enough and you get selected, you can actually serve your time in the Battle of Britain Memorial Flight Squadron, where you're flying or maintaining, operating Hurricanes, Spitfires, and Lancasters. And there's 2 Lancasters in the world, one in Canada and one in the UK, that operate. So they want to have a Mosquito, and there's only 4 of them flying. This one's earmarked for them. I appraised that this past Christmas, so they could raise some money. And then probably the Queen, B-29 is the real queen of the fleet, but I mean, it's so rare and unusual that I think the B-17, there's 5 of them flying. At one time there were like 20 of them flying after they were used for transporting cattle in South America or firebombing or dropping water on fires. A bunch of different uses, but once people realized that they were really special, and there were about 20 of these flying. Now they've narrowed down to 5, and I would say we're looking 30 million plus for one of those. B-29, oh my God, way more than that. So, as I said, I'm looking at the time, I'm going to have to speed this up. Basically, 1,150 manufacturers, and this goes back 3 years. People that have designed and delivered airplanes. The price guides I previously mentioned, they only cover about 150 of them. That's why appraising off of airplanes is so important. Provenance, what is it? I've actually got a provenance rating system that I've developed. The Mona Lisa obviously has provenance, and it's probably the most historic, famous, widely known painting on the planet. And of course, you've got Glamorous Glennis there, that broke the sound barrier, Chuck Yeager. I can attest that they're one of the same, really, from a historical standpoint. I mean, if that was just a regular airplane, rocket plane that didn't break the sound barrier, wasn't the first, then it's going to be worth a lot less than that airplane that actually broke the sound barrier. If it wasn't the Mona Lisa, sorry, if it wasn't the Mona Lisa, it's going to be worth a lot less. So, thanks. Elvis's Jetstar went to auction. It's actually coming up for auction again soon. We have Frank Sinatra's Lear 23 Learjet, and we have Bud Tordoff's P-51. All of those broke records, and it's all because of their history. Here's a good example. This one was purchased by Ronald Lauder from the Estée Lauder family. It's in France, but this airplane only had a few hours on it. In fact, if I remember correctly, it's written up there. It had 32 hours and 5 minutes on it, and then it had an engine problem, landed on a beach, and it was discovered and dug up and restored by the folks at Biggin Hill. And it went to auction, and at that time it reached, almost $5 million. Interesting to me, or interesting to you maybe, one of the warbirds on this planet that's actually growing in numbers because of restorations and also because of replicas. They may have serial data plate or a piece from an original airplane. They call it the same airplane, but it really is a replica. Where are we? 2022. So in 2010, there were 24 Spitfires flying in the world. They reckon by 2030, there's going to be more than 50. How about that? That's pretty cool. All right. So how do I get into it? There's my rating system. I got a rating table, so I figure out what the important history of the airplane is, and I add value to it. So I come up with fair market value based on comparative sales, cost approach. I'll explain that very quickly here in a moment. But I come up with my value, and then I multiply it by the percentage amount for the history. So that's the provenance rating. So what are the components of an appraised value? To the right, you can see the appraisal process. There's three approaches to value. And this is just like real estate. If you have ever had a house appraised, it's exactly the same as an airplane. True. There's cost, there's income, and there's sales comparison. 90% of my appraisals are sales comparisons because I go find comps and I usually use 8 airplanes on a spreadsheet to adjust to come up with value. Rare airplanes, like the world's rarest business jet, I use the Jetstar because it was competitive, and that's what the contract came about. I'll actually, like I did with the Jetstar, use other airplanes similar to that to come up with value. Anyway, it's all about data. It's all about data discovery. Original price is very, very important. It's a starting point for me to actually develop my opinion of value. Obviously, times are there experts out there with a handful of these airplanes flying? Can I talk to them? Can I get insight into these airplanes? What kind of restoration is done to these airplanes, and what kind of value does it add, and what's the history? So, original new price, vital component. Year model value difference. Obviously, if there are multiples of these airplanes out there but they're not covered by a book, you're going to have to figure out, well, you've got to, like the Staggerwing, for instance. They were built from, I think, 38 or 39 until, I think, 1950. They were built out in Dallas by the folks type certificate, and they were the latest and greatest. Anyway, you've got to figure out how do you differentiate between these airplanes. So you've got to do some thinking, hard thinking. You've got to adjust the engines, airframe, and if you've got a fleet of them, and there you go, there's Staggerwing right there. And I talked about refurbishment. On P-51, there are some things that really need to be done, like changing the fuselage longerons, upgrading the cooling system, some other things as well. Heads and banks of the engines, they all add value to the airplanes. If they're not done, then the airplanes are worth less. So as I said, sales comparison approach, cost approach, income approach. It's the same for any appraisal, for anything, diamond, ring, cars, doesn't matter. So sometimes you have to use all three, especially for a museum. Income approach. I need to know how many people come through the doors, how many people pay the admission price, and try and divide that income, annual income, per the exhibits, so I can actually apply that as part of the income approach appraisal of that artifact. So the airplane may not be worth a lot, but if it's a big draw for the museum, then that needs to be accounted for. I use Tip Planes magazine for airplanes that may be built in the 20s, but they're modern representations of them, or like-kind airplanes. A lot of information in Tip Planes magazine. You've got to use the data wherever you get it. Okay, historical data sources. I was very fortunate. I was volunteer president of the Greater St. Louis Air and Space Museum for 5 years, and they've got a fabulous library. And I often click into that, use that, physically go through the dusty tomes and find information that is just not available on the internet. There's a lot of other books out there. I'm always scouring eBay and other bookshops for rare aviation books, because it's unfortunately, like, we as the human animal, we've got a limited life, and we will pass on, and unfortunately a lot of the knowledge and information just passes along with that individual. Thank goodness some people wrote the stuff down, so you got to grab the books when you can. And I hate paper. Whenever I go somewhere, like the doctor's appointment, and they hand me my orders, I say, I don't want that. I'll take a picture of it. I want to live paper free. When it comes to appraising airplanes, you cannot have enough of it. Web sources, every search engine you use gives you different results, so you have to use them all to try and get something in between. And the most important thing is, don't believe what you read on the internet. Facebook, Twitter, I don't have accounts anymore, but I still go in. A lot of airplanes are listed on there, which you won't see anywhere else. And then I actually collect advertisements for airplanes that get published electronically. I'll screenshot, save them as PDF, throw them onto my iCloud drive, and I've got my ever-evolving database of sales comps. And then events like this. I mean, it's super to see everyone here, and hopefully you're regular visitors to this monthly event. But when you do get together and break some bread and commune, there's so much data and knowledge transferred amongst yourselves that, you know, these kind of events are a must do. In fact, talking to Rich, I learned a couple of things about submarines today. Amazing. Create your own book. I've actually got my own price guide that is evolving over time. And rules of thumb, there's, like for instance, I can hardly read this, but basically, so I was at the National Business Aviation Association convention in Las Vegas like 3-4 years ago, and Rockwell Collins had just brought out their Proline Fusion EFIS system. It's an integrated avionics system, TV screens again. And I said to them, how the heck do you guys figure out how to price these things? And they told me, we take the fair market value of the average fair market value for used airplanes, and in this case it was a Cessna Citation CJ2, and I said, so how do you figure out how much you're going to charge for this? And it was like, it was not even $300,000 what they were touting at the show. I said, how'd you come up with it? We take 5% of the fair market value, and that's what we charge. So it's interesting. So if you have somebody come over and quote you a new kitchen, you know, they look at your car, they look at your house, and they pull a number out and say, this is what it's going to cost. Well, even the avionics guys are doing that. So there you go. Next. So, look at that. Okay. It's really all about history. It's really all about research, digging in deep, just by looking at comparative sales, trying to come up with what is like-kind, similar type of airplane for a rare airplane, come up with value, you're not doing your job if you don't dig deep, get the history, and then apply value to that history. Because you're selling an airplane short, you're selling your client short, it needs to be added in there. Off-book airplanes, there's no books out there that you can subscribe to that give you values. You've got to come up with yourself, but you've got to account for the history. Next one, Alan. Thank you very much. Any questions?
At this point in time, we'll field questions, so I'm going to take the mic and I'm back and forth. So, I have a question in the back. If you have a question, please just stand up, say your name, and say your question loud and loud.
Like this? I've got several questions on the electric one.
Yeah.
How far can it go on? How long does it take to recharge the battery? And what is the life of the battery for this use?
Great questions. I am by no means an expert, but I can tell you that the range on these airplanes, unless it's like the, solar impulse, which to Switzerland, and that actually flew around the world, and it had solar cells on the top of the wings, and that airplane obviously it stops occasionally for maintenance and what have you, but it did fly through the night, even though the sun was not out, so it was running on electrical power. So in those instances, yeah, they've got range, but I don't think we're practically there yet still. The Rolls-Royce airplane, again, I'm not an expert, but is very, very limited. I think you're looking at maybe 20, 25 minutes, but they're going to speed. And then battery life, there's a lot of technology evolving. Most of it's in the car business, but there needs to be a lot of improvement in battery technology. But we're actually I'm seeing, just as a layman, reading magazines and reading stuff on the web, there's hybrids. There's quite a few hybrid airplanes being developed out there that will use gas, or in fact, eventually we're going to eliminate lead, and it's going to be unleaded fuel, which is a big problem for these airplanes because, this one's not too bad. It's fairly high compression, but you take the P-51s, the Merlins, those kind of high compression, the Allisons, the V engines, it's going to really hurt them when we go to unleaded gas. So hopefully it's still additive. Anyway, hybrid airplanes that happen. Does that answer your question?
Other questions? Yes, here in the back.
I've been interested in the Valley Made for a long time, since we got to see it. Have you been requested to get an assessment about the value of that thing?
Sure.
Valley Made, and it's in Chino, California.
No, I haven't.
Okay.
I'd like to.
Question for Mark?
Jeremy, we've got two airplanes here behind you. Can you tell us a little bit about the importance of us having these airplanes, the importance of Evansville having a P-47 that was made here, and P-44, 45, and the Stearman, and you look at it as a rare coin, it's important for Evansville history.
Mark, I mean, that's kind of an inside question, and it's a little biased, but as you can tell from, hopefully, I didn't bore you, but I'm a geek. I love airplanes. I'm passionate, and my God, if this history can be preserved in a flying form, better than just being static display, thank the Lord. Absolutely. The unfortunate thing is, I mean, you talk about the greatest generation, and you were referencing upcoming luncheons, and people are they're getting pretty senior, and the greatest generation is passing on, and fortunately, keeping people interested and engaged in some of the most important events historically in this country's history is so important. But the Evansville Wartime Museum, honestly, is a vital component to maintaining our sovereignty, our pride, and the history of this great country. So, does that answer the question?
All right, we get here from Brian.
Yeah, Brian, just out of curiosity, would you have any idea what kind of appraisal would be on the spruce goose?
Yeah, I'm not going to give you value. Fortunately, a lot of airplanes are owned by billionaires, and billionaires are very private people. They don't like you to talk about stuff. And there are other instances. So I hate to be one of those irritating people that won't give you numbers. But I did give you some numbers today, and those are real numbers. But specifically the spruce goose, and answering your question, I know exactly how I would appraise it if I had the opportunity to do it. It would be a combination of all three approaches to value. Obviously, cost. I take the original cost of that airplane, the cost how it's used to build. I would adjust it for the consumer price index. And then I would also look at similar airplanes. I know it's the only one in the world, but I'd probably look at Grumman Albatross and other airplanes similar to it. That adds a component to it. And then, of course, it's in a museum, so you need to account for the traffic and the interest. And basically, the admission fees go towards thanks to that airplane. And so it all goes into a witch's cauldron, stir it up, and you try and figure, is it credible? And that's really what it boils down to. I mean, it's my opinion of value, but the fact is, and I've experienced this multiple times, I do a lot of legal testimony as an expert witness where I have to value something and then testify in court. You can get a handful of appraisals, or you can get 10 appraisals. I mean, I've never had 10 appraisals, but I've had 5, and we all come up with a very similar number. I mean, it may be, depending on the amount, let's say it's $1 million, there may be $750,000 estimates, and there may be $1,250,000. But basically, it's about the same, so it works out.
Any other questions from the Mike Lynn?
I saw you had, Mike Lynn, I'm volunteer here. I saw you had a mosquito that you, those type of planes being wooden of the warbirds, are they, two-part question, are they a lot more rare, do they have more provenance? Also, I really didn't see any World War II Russian. I know there's some around here you come across then, your business.
Repeat your question, if you would, Jeremy.
Yeah, so Mike is asking about Russian airplanes, and I have appraised Russian airplanes. There are a few around, Hawks and Yaks and so forth. Doesn't happen that often. Unfortunately, Russian airplanes don't have a lot of value compared to other warbirds. And so, as in anything, well, there's several sayings I can use here, but I'm not going to, it's just stupid. But basically, if it's not worth much, people aren't going to spend a couple of grand for me to come and appraise the airplane. So, that's the bottom line. Now, Mike also asked about having a Mosquito being an all-wood airplane, plywood, balsa, and some other woods, spruce, but predominantly a wooden airplane. And that was the biggest downfall for that airplane. Jeffrey de Howard built the airplane, designed and built it out of Salisbury Hall in the UK, and they trucked it under tarpaulins to Hatfield, flew the airplane, and then it became the Wooden Wonder. And I can't remember, it was on my slide. About 4,000 of them were built at different plants, including Canada and in Australia. The problem being, especially the Pacific Rim airplanes, initially they were built with casein glue, something called casein glue, which is melt-based, and the heat and humidity would make those joints fail. And so these airplanes just didn't stick around. They just rotted away. So they're very rare, and there's only 4 of them in the world flying. There's more of them coming. New Zealand, there's a gentleman that just passed away. Unfortunately, his son is continuing on his legacy there in North Island, and they built the jigs. So you build the fuselage of the Mosquito in 2 halves. So they build the jigs, they lay the plywood over, they steam it, they put metal racks around it, and it forms, and then they glue everything together. The casein glue, even during World War II, went away because they realized that it was, a milk-based glue was a problem, so they went to an epoxy, thank goodness. And there's quite a few of these airplanes. I went to the De Havilland Museum a couple of times now. They got 3 Mosquitoes in the hangar together. Unprecedented, but none of them are airworthy. That's the unfortunate thing. It takes a lot of money. Restoration of a rare warbird, whatever it is, millions. That Air Force One, first Air Force One, by the time they're done, they're going to have close to $20 million into that airplane in restoration. You could easily put $2 or $3 million into P-47 and P-51 if you go crazy. And obviously, if it's got historical value, then absolutely it's worth every single penny and more. But there are some airplanes where they don't have the history, they don't have the provenance, and it's, you're doing it because you love it, but you'll never see the money back. Does that answer your question?
My name's Kevin, and I've got 3 questions for you about one topic. How many P-38s are still flying? What is an average one worth? And where's the closest one to here?
All right. Can you go back, Darren?
Did I miss that?
Yeah, you did. That's all right.
I'm sorry. I couldn't relate. I thought surely I won't ask a question you answer.
Repeat the question, Jeremy.
No, I will. Okay, stop. Go through it. That's it. All right. Question was, how many P-38s are flying? About what they're worth, and where is the closest one to Evansville? So I can tell you this. They're valued between $6 and $15 million. A $6 million P-38 is pretty rare. Probably doesn't even fly. I mean, when I say racky, so the Richard R. Bond airplane that I showed you earlier, that was restored to a very high level, but it's unairworthy. It couldn't fly if they wanted it to, because the engines haven't been preserved, the propellers haven't been overhauled. I mean, there's lots of issues, and there's probably structural and system issues with the airplane. They just haven't been restored to flight-worthy condition, but the airplane is restored to a very high visual standard. There have been cases where there have been $6 million P-38s in the last 10 years, but they're pretty rare. 15 million plus, and there's 9 flying, and there are over 10,000 built. And probably, I'm guessing, the closest P-38 would be up in Minnesota with Fagan fighters, would be my guess, I think, which you can go see a P-38 fly.
Thank you. Sorry to be redundant. Okay, any more questions this point in time.
Closer to the mouth. Yeah.
About the aircraft that is not allowed to fly in U.S. space, but does in Canada. Why? I mean, do they have to pass a test? I don't, okay. He's got a point.
So, the young lady there is asking about, in specific terms, the Russian helicopters. Planes built around the world that don't have a United States certificate of airworthiness, and most importantly, the limiting factor really is having a United States type certificate. The type certificate is what makes it possible to make that airplane a U.S. registered and U.S. certificated product. There's a lot of airplanes out there that have not met the federal aviation regulation requirements, the standards, and they won't ever get a type certificate issued to them. The MI series, I think that's probably going to happen. I think they are going to get a type certificate. But it takes a lot of money. And Russia has been broken up during the fall of the war with Gorbachev. And I guess things kind of got better for them. But unfortunately, all the Olympic athletes, wrestlers, heavyweight boxers, and heavy lifters, and everyone, they basically became the organized crime, took over the facilities and said, I'm now building helicopters, I'm now building guns, I'm now building tanks, what have you. And they're the modern version of Russian industry. And now we've got Mr. Crazy Man that is causing all sorts of problems. And I'm not even going to get into the politics of any of it. So when the Russians sort themselves out again, yeah, there are Russian airplanes here that are operated on the U.S. register and have certificates, and I think there will be more, but we need to see things calm down. But it's all about regulation. Does that answer your question? It's about regulation. They have to meet the requirements of the United States government, Federal Aviation Administration, and say these are the standards they have to. And it's speed, stall speeds, construction, structure, all sorts of things. You guys have been great. The guys and gals, sorry. I rarely get this many questions, so woohoo! Thank you. God bless America.